In political discussions on and off of YouTube, I often find myself perplexed and taken aback by the continual juxtapositioning of the concepts of communism and anarchism, as though they were mutually exclusive, inherently opposing ideologies, rather than intimately intertwined variations on the same theme. There's this bold-faced, sort of monochrome dichotomy that attempts to caricature communism and anarchism as singular and unmalleable entities, and while simultaneously failing to represent the innumerable amoeba-like nuances and forms that socialism takes on while encompassing both anarchism and communism simultaneously. Now, certainly there are certain statist forms of communism which are rightly understood to be highly at odds with anarchist modes of thought, but there are in fact communist theories which are anarchistic, as well as anarchist theories which propose completely distinct forms of communist thought and completely different conceptions of the role of the state. So, in an attempt to clear the air and give a more full-bodied form to socialist thought, I'd like to just enumerate on the varieties of socialism. Now, the first thing that comes to mind when you say communism in the rather commonplace mind is a form of statism, and not just any form of statism. As I would like, as I will enumerate, I believe there's more than one form of state socialism, and there's more than one form of stateless socialism or anarchistic communism. But the most commonly understood is what I would refer to as Leninism. This is often referred to as Marxist-Leninism, but I refrain from using that terminology, as I believe that from my readings and the direct commentary of both Marx and Engels explicitly, their commentary on the role of the state and the dictatorship of the proletariat are rather alien to the Leninist innovations on communist thought. The entire notion of a vanguard party or a one-party state was very well, this would have been a sort of unintelligible thing to Marx or Engels, and they speak explicitly for instance, Engels in his commentary on, I believe it's called the Civil War in France, a little minor treatise he wrote up. He spoke of the dictatorship of the proletariat, and when Engels pointed to the dictatorship of the proletariat, he said words to the effect of, well and good, gentlemen, would you like to know what the dictatorship of the proletariat is? Look at the Paris Commune. That's what it is. And if you look at the Paris Commune, there is something very, very much at odds with the notion of the modern communist state in terms of the Soviet Union or China or any of the other 20th century connotations. These are all, I would say, innovations or attempts to essentially bastardize Marxist thought. Because when we look at the Commune of Paris, the dictatorship of the proletariat as manifested in 1871, we see very clearly that the notion of a state in that context had very little in common with the notion of the Soviet state. While in the Soviet Union there was a singular bureaucratic apparatus, a single party, which determined, which was for all intents and purposes the state, which determined the role of all individuals in the state and composed the complete government infrastructure. Whereas in the Commune of Paris, the entire government, the governing body of the Commune itself, was composed of individuals elected from workers' councils, across all of the regions and districts in Paris, who were all recallable at any moment and who were directly accountable to their electorate, to their representatives, and there was no manufactured party bureaucracy, and there was no essentially top-down structure. It was completely bottom-up, as opposed to the Leninist understanding of how the dictatorship of the proletariat should function. Rather than functioning in the name of the people, which under the guise of the party, the Commune of Paris was composed essentially of the elected delegates of assembled workers' councils from across the whole of Paris, and all of which took their orders essentially from the people, and they were they were both legislative and executive, essentially in nature in their governing. They had no ability to maintain their office indefinitely and could be removed absolutely immediately if their electors decided to do so immediately. And they didn't give orders to the people that the people themselves did not themselves concede to. If a majority of their electors from their assembled workers' councils had in fact decided that they were no longer fit to represent them, then they would be recalled. Whereas in the Soviet-style Leninist dictatorship of the proletariat, the party is law, and those elected, essentially those elected to the Supreme Soviet, all have to have official party endorsement, and their word is absolute, and to act against that is treason, for they are supposedly the people incarnate, and they make the laws which no individual who is not in the party or who is not in one of the higher levels of the dictating Soviets, if you're not in one of those, you have no sway whatsoever. There was no recall. There was no notion of recallable delegates. The business of government was completely filled with underhanded machinations, and there was it was completely inaccessible to the people, and the assembled workers' councils, the Soviets, were a mere facade, all prearranged and predetermined by the upper echelons of the Soviet government, who held all power and enforced collectivization policies, regardless of the individual wills of the individual workers themselves. While in the Commune of Paris, this sort of government explicitly endorsed by Marx and Engels as the proper preparatory stage for communism itself, as the proper way to carry out the dictatorship of the proletariat. All business of government in terms of production rates and prices, and just the business of government itself, education, social issues, what have you, all essentially had to meet with the approval of the masses, or those delegates would be recalled. And this is just, it's stark as a contrast to the Soviet-style dictatorship of the proletariat, which it was supposedly called. The Soviet Union made their laws irrespective of the will of the people. Whatever their prices were, that's what they were. Whatever their production rates and quotas were, that's what they were. And there would be no input from the lesser echelons of the supposed dictatorship, of the supposed masses who were ideally in control, who in reality had no control whatsoever over the level of production or prices, and had no control over the means of production whatsoever. These were hoarded by the members of the ruling party state.